Hi everyone, it's Eric again. If you haven't been to my channel before, welcome. Today I thought I'd talk about a subject that's very important to me, cancer. Some of you may not know, but I actually worked in a cancer research lab for almost 2 decades, and as you can see by the parchments on the wall here, I have a little bit of an addiction to higher education. My wife also seems to share that. Many of you also know that I was diagnosed with a life-limiting cancer about 7 months ago, and so my perspective on cancer, I think, is a bit of an unusual one, going from cancer scientist to cancer patient. And you can't help but have your perspective changed by that kind of a situation. I thought today was such a nice day that why don't we just go out for a walk and get some perspective on the world? Hi, we're now at the Dundas Trail Center, and it's a beautiful day to go out for a walk. We're about 5 kilometers away from where we live in Dundas, Ontario, part of Hamilton, and the location where we are right now is 70 km to the west of the CN Tower in Toronto. So that gives you an idea where we are. When I started my relationship with cancer, it was in a cancer research lab, and I spent about 18 years in there, and I moved from being a technician, went and eventually got my PhD. I was a much older student then, and ending up after doing a postdoc fellowship in bone cancer pain, I was able to end up as a staff research scientist at the local cancer center. Oddly, that's also where I ended up being treated. Without getting into all the nitty-gritty details, when I was in the lab, I was looking at cancer from a cellular perspective. I looked at how cancer cells functioned, what they were, very descriptive stuff, and eventually moved into changing my perspective to more of what cancer cells do rather than what they are. Although I no longer work in the research lab, I'm still interested in cancer from many different directions, obviously, but I'm now an assistant professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences at McMaster University, and I do full-time teaching now rather than doing lab work. As a scientist, I've seen cancer from many different perspectives. I've grown it in a dish, I've looked at it under a microscope, I've held it in my hands, I've put it into animals, I've taken it from animals, I've done almost everything you can with cancer. If you're interested in the kind of stuff that I've done in the academic world, I'll leave some links below so you can read it if you want. Now, about 7 months ago, many of you know that I was diagnosed with stage 4 anaplastic thyroid cancer. Not certainly a good diagnosis, and soon after I was been told that, by my oncologist, that I only had a few months to live. In fact, I guess the biggest prediction was we kind of forced out of the oncologist was that I probably had about a 50-50 chance of living through April, May 2020. It's right now July 2020, so I think I'm doing okay. Honestly, I'm not doing great. The last several weeks have been a mess for me. I've had a lot of fatigue and pain, even though the tumor's no longer there. My perspective did change. I ended up, for quite a number of months focusing on the problem, learning about the cancer more than I knew before, and I got a bit target fixated and soon realized I was kind of missing the point. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is my change in perspective as a person with cancer rather than as a scientist studying it. Yeah, I used to be fascinated by everything around me and the beauty that I see. Yeah, I always was a scientist. Wanted to figure out how it worked. But I think now my perspective has changed to be much more focused on experiencing more, because everything is much more fascinating now that I know I have less time to look at it. And so I'm just blown away by what's around me, and I want to experience it all rather than simply study it. And that's one of the reasons I like to get out and explore and do different things I've never done, is because I want to experience things rather than just look at them. Well, currently I'm actually in remission. That's what the oncologists say, is they can't find the tumor in my neck, so we're kind of in a pause. It was a surprise to everybody that I'd be in remission, because that is not something that usually happens with this cancer. But I do know that I am not off the roller coaster yet. It is a roller coaster, and we just happen to be maybe going up right now, but it will change, and I expect it to change. So it's not going to be a surprise or a disaster if things do go downhill again. It is a roller coaster ride. To explain better what I mean by my change in perspective, I probably should just use an analogy. And I like analogies, and this one I'll set in a forest. So you're in a forest and you're hunting for your next meal. So you look around at everything and you track it down. You focus on what that is you're trying to find, whether it's a particular plant or an animal or something like that. If you've focused on your next meal, you'll probably have a good chance of continuing on. So it's certainly not a bad thing to have some target fixation, unless you're going to get lost in the forest. Cancer has a similar effect on people, and I noticed it myself, as it makes you focus and fixate on the cancer. And I got lost in the forest doing that. I was too focused on what was going on, what the cancer was doing, what my future would look like, and I forgot that I was in a forest surrounded by interesting and beautiful things. After my hyper-focused stage that I went through, I realized that I had to put some context around it. This cancer was happening in my life, not to my life. Once I realized that I was missing the forest for the trees, things switched. I started to think, what do I want to see? What do I want to do? And where do I want to go? Of course, COVID happened, and the where you want to go kind of went out the window. I think once I realized that I could look around the problem, look around my life, I could re-engage with my life and do the things that I wanted to do, in spite of cancer. Essentially, I figured out it was a lot more interesting to appreciate the beauty of life rather than focusing on a problem that I had little control over. So that's what's changed for me. I can focus on enjoying life with cancer rather than enduring life because I've got cancer. What this does is it shifts the control over my life back to me in a very subtle way, and takes it away from cancer and lets cancer not control things for me. And yes, that may be a bit of a weird perspective, but if you know me, weird is good. So if you're going through a difficult time with cancer like I am, take a look at your life and look at the problems, but then look around them. You'll probably find that you'll have a lot more control, a lot more enjoyment of things if you look at the context of where you are. Cancer lives with me, not the other way around. Appreciate the gifts that you've got and focus less on the problems you face. That's how I wake up every day and realize that the world is a fascinating place, and every day is a new adventure, regardless of how long you have left to enjoy it. Bye.